Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively merging the streams, bringing together 22 and a half years of sports radio and web technology with the Baltimore Positive logo. We're getting that all together at BaltimorePositive.com. We've cleaned Luke up from that White House picture I took a few years ago and artisized him and Don Moeller and myself as well. And, I hope I get some artistry on Sunday up in Philadelphia. The first guest I had on earlier in the week, I said, man, I'm going to get to go up to Philadelphia, sneak into an empty stadium, maybe wear a little purple with my pink or, my crucial catch and all that. And now, lo and behold, they're going to let the animals into the zoo, Luke. So they're going to let some people in on Sunday. I'm going up. I hope this game's as easy as we're sort of making these games to be when we're taking on teams with defenses that have been running around struggling in a struggling division with a struggling quarterback and a struggling everything. That I hope we don't struggle. And this is going to feel a little bit like a road game, I would think, in Philadelphia, that 6,000 or 7,000 will try to boo like 60,000 or 70,000.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. John Harbaugh was asked about it on Wednesday and said, look, we played in front of fans plenty of times, and we played in front of many more fans, but just knowing how strange the start of the season has been, and, it's up to 7,500 people, but that includes players, media, team personnel, stadium personnel, so it's not going to be 7,500 fans, but it's going to be maybe 7,000, just under that maybe. So
I hope we don't have any problems parking. I hope they don't take all the pretzels.
I would think you'll be okay. The stadium complex there, it's actually a pretty decent setup from a fan standpoint there.
I was telling everybody this week, man, my wife and I broke out the Live Aid videos back in July, right, because it was the anniversary, and I had never really sat with my wife and told her the whole story. And so I got some stories in that parking lot, but, as long as they have parking for me, I'm going to be very, very happy.
Parking and a pretzel, right? You need to get the pretzel.
I got to get a pretzel. I'm thinking about the cheesesteak, but the pretzel's going to happen. And, I'm looking forward to that. It's the little things during a plague, Luke,
No question about it. And for the Ravens, as you mentioned, I think you look at this game on paper and you say, okay, well, Philadelphia, first of all, that division is just a disaster. When you're talking about a team that has one win on the season and you're being talked about as they could quite possibly win that division still, and Dak Prescott's done for the Cowboys, and what's Andy Dalton going to do there? You look at the Eagles and you say,
"I'm putting a dollar on Andy Dalton right now. Can I throw a dollar in the ring?"
And look, that might be the answer. But you
and I'm no Cowboys fan,
right? But you do look at Philadelphia and you see the injuries they've had, especially at the wide receiver position. This is something they've dealt with going back the last year or two. Carson Wentz, much maligned in some ways, kind of reminds you of post Super Bowl 47 Joe Flacco in that way. And he needs to play better. There's no question about that. As you know, Nestor, my brother-in-law is a diehard Eagles fan, so I've seen them a little bit, and certainly I talked to him about it and to hear what he has to say. But it's just a football team that has been absolutely woeful offensively, and defensively they haven't been much better. They've been better than their offense has been, which has been a bottom five kind of unit, but it's not as though their defense has played particularly well. They're really weak at the linebacker position, and we talk about this a lot with this Ravens offense. Current struggles aside, just knowing the setup of it, we know how pivotal those linebackers tend to be against the run, making sure they're disciplined so Lamar Jackson's not going to run all over you, and certainly covering tight ends and running backs, kind of protecting the middle of the field, knowing how important that is for the Ravens. So from a matchup standpoint, this is the kind of game, to what you alluded to. It feels like it's a good matchup for the Ravens, and they should go to Philadelphia and take care of business. I don't know if you ever expect a full-blown blowout where you're just going to demolish them, but it's certainly a game that on paper looks like one the Ravens should be able to go there, take care of business, and then go into the bye week at 5-1, which, as much as we've talked about some of the things that haven't gone perfectly for this football team, you'll take that 5-1 at the bye week, and assuming you can escape this one without any major injuries, setting yourself up for what's going to be a difficult month of November, but also a very successful second half of the season, being in the position the Ravens can put themselves in with another win.
Dude, I wore my green El Guapo shirt earlier in the week, and you're wearing your green York College alumni shirt here. So, I'm thinking about the Eagles this week and where they are in the franchise. I've talked to so many people up there this week about Wentz and what he represents, and the Kelseys and sort of the holdovers from the championship. It really does remind me of the struggle years of Flacco after the injury and sort of a couple of 2-3 years later after a championship. What happens? And, I think about just being at that party that night, where the trophy's coming through. Schwartz is there, Peterson's there, but I'm thinking about the players that were there that night. The Foleses and the Corey Grahams and the Torrey Smiths and the Nelson Aguilars that are in other places. And you think about how quickly things turn over, and you thought they were on to something there, right? Where they were going to be that perennial 10 or 11 win, the way Andy Reid had it figured out for a while. Never won, but was always there. Sort of like Harbaugh here. Not never won because John's won, but always sort of there. And then sort of the fall from grace of Wentz and what happens to a quarterback when you don't protect him, you don't have weapons, you don't have special people around, you get off a rookie contract. You have all of those things going on. And then you don't draft well. And, maybe Howie Roseman's not the genius. Maybe the genius is up in New York with Flacco, looking like the village idiot right now, but maybe looking like he's going to get that tall, good-looking player from Clemson next year.
Yeah, and I think it's an important lesson to remember just how much has to go well, even if you're talking about having a quarterback on a rookie contract. You just mentioned some key veterans they brought in, the Corey Grahams, the Torrey Smiths, who didn't play a gigantic role, but they make plays for you along
Timmy
the way.
Jernigan was there. They threw him out of the league again last week, I think, right?
But you think back to the 2000 Ravens and the Anthony Mitchells of that team, who didn't do much, but, my goodness, comes up with one of the biggest plays in franchise history, returning the block kick. And you think of 2012, guys like Corey Graham, as you mentioned, and, you have Jacoby Jones. You have guys that when you add them, when you add them in March or April, whenever it happens, you don't think a whole lot about it, right? But when you have that good mix of players and some beneficial circumstances like a rookie contract for your quarterback, you bring in those few extra pieces that make a difference. But when you pay your quarterback, you have a much smaller margin for error. And then when you look at what's happened to Philadelphia, their offensive line has just been absolutely decimated by injuries. And you're talking about some Pro Bowl caliber type guys that have dealt with injuries for them the last couple of years. Wide receiver position has been an absolute disaster for them from an injury standpoint. Alshon Jeffrey is practicing. We'll see if he makes his debut. Deshaun Jackson has missed time. So they have some guys that have been good in the past, but as you know, guys who, even if they're durable at one point, they're durable until they aren't anymore. And Philadelphia has been dealing with that. And just think about, you mentioned Carson Wentz, and we've compared it to the post-Super Bowl Joe Flacco era. He's not the one who won that Super Bowl. And I'm not even saying that as a knock on him. He was on his way to quite possibly being the MVP of the league. Nick Foles wins it. So just think if this had been what had happened with the Ravens, where Joe Flacco gets hurt in December and Tyrod Taylor takes the Ravens to the Super Bowl, but then they still pay Joe Flacco. Just imagine what the perception would have been from that standpoint. So, it's not a perfect comparison. I'm not trying to make it out to be.
But he needs to win some games.
Well, sure. And he needs to play better in addition to all those other areas that we talked about that have been deficiencies for them. And, they're in a division for their sake, for their benefit. They're in a division where they still have plenty of time. And despite the fact that they've only won one game and they're sitting there at 1-3-1, and in most divisions you'd say, wow, you're really in a lot of trouble. They're not in a whole lot of trouble from that standpoint relative to the rest of their division. So it is interesting, but Doug Peterson's dealing with this too. Frank Reich, look at how big he was for that team a few years ago. He's not there anymore. And, people will look at that and then they say, well, maybe Frank Reich should have been the head coach, and maybe Doug Peterson was overrated. So long story short, and mind you, this is still a team that's made the playoffs the last couple of years. It's not as though they've fallen off a cliff.
And by the way, they're in a division where, 8-7-1 might get it done, right?
Right. But at the same time, when it's not going as well as it did in 2017, and you see some key veterans move on. Another guy that, I mean, Malcolm Jenkins was such a big leader for that defense. Even though he's not the player he was a few years ago, people are still going to point to that. So, they've had a lot of attrition, whether it be injuries, free agency, coaches moving on to a better opportunity somewhere else. I mean, as you know, teams don't stay together, and championship teams especially do not stay together because people want those players and those coaches in many cases. So they're just living in that world that when you have a high-paid quarterback and he's not necessarily one of the top 2 or 3 in terms of just quality, but they're still being paid among the top quarterbacks, we just know that margin for error shrinks considerably. Hey, it's what the Ravens are going to be dealing with in the not too distant future from the time that they pay Lamar Jackson and whoever else they're going to pay after paying Marlon Humphrey recently. So, it's one of those reminders for the Ravens, I think, that, hey, your window is still open and it's going to be open for the next year or two, but you better take advantage because it's going to get much more difficult after that. Not to say that it closes, but you just have a much smaller margin for error, and you're so much more dependent to what you mentioned, drafting and staying healthy, because you just don't have that same depth. You don't have that same quality of roster from 1 down to 53.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. WNST.net is now Baltimore Positive. We are merging the streams here this week as we head off to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles and fly, Eagles fly. You can catch all sorts of segments with Philadelphia folks out at Baltimore Positive, as well as here at AM 1570. All of it brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. My wife picked me up the box of chicken. I finished off the last piece on Wednesday night. There was no Wednesday night football, but there was Tuesday night, Monday night football. I was eating the chicken on Sunday. Get the Western Fry, stop in. I got the coffee in the cup here all the time, the Cole Roofing mug. We had Bill Cole on as well, talking about all sorts of confidence levels and change as well, as we're changing things around here at Baltimore Positive. You can find that. You want to change your health and your life? Planet Fitness has an opportunity for you as well at planetfitness.com. We had the Bricks on last week. They had a Move Your Body challenge and get movement, create movement in your life. We always talk about Wim Hof and jumping in the ice bath with Lynn and Victor Brick. You can find that out at Baltimore Positive as well. The magma lamp is flowing for Eagles week. We could beat the Washington football team that I can't even say their last name and the Eagles. And I get to witness it back to back in the same month around my birthday, my 52nd birthday for Ray Lewis. Sporticulture, that's where you get the magma lamp. You can also get the flowers. Court will be coming on. We're going to talk about the Houston Oilers. We were both Oiler fans. It's weird how many Oiler fans that I've collected. Dennis Colatzos was an Oilers fan. Court was an Oilers fan. And I was an Oilers fan. Somebody else I met recently that told me that they adopted the Oilers, and I'm like, really? Like, that's a weird thing. You got to be kind of old to remember the Colts leaving, though. That Colts movie is also out as well on 33rd Street. And they asked me to do something, and I don't know if I made the cut or not, but we're going to be doing a piece on that sometime soon as well. Luke, on the Eagles game and on the purple side, right? Lamar Jackson didn't run the ball. You know, we all have questions about the health and in the aftermath of his illness last week and whatever stomach bug he had. He looked a little more chipper and seemed a little more chipper and even talked that he felt a little more chipper, and that's probably a good thing, and it's probably not such a good thing for Schwartzy this week, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the health is fine. I'm not going to sit here and say boldly that he's definitely 100%. I don't know that for sure, but I think he's much better. He wasn't even listed on the injury report at the start of the practice week on Wednesday, so I would assume that's not going to be as much of an issue. I don't take a whole lot away from what we saw on Sunday in that regard. I mean, people will say, well, 2 carries, that's the lowest he's had as a starter in the NFL. Well, he clearly wasn't 100% in terms of even if his knee was okay from a confidence standpoint to take off and run. And but it's fair to note he hasn't been running as frequently over the first, go back to the first 4 games of the season. His average carries per game is down a little bit, even taking out quarterback kneels. So that's something to watch. And it's interesting, Nestor. I encourage everyone to go to BaltimorePositive.com. I took a deep dive looking at this Ravens offense and really trying to figure it out because we all look at the end result, right? We all look at statistics. We'll look at yardage. We'll look at points scored. Even looking at yards per carry. Right now, you look at the Ravens running game, and it's 5.6 yards per carry, which is a smidge better than it was last year. So naturally, everyone's going to say, what? Well, you should be running the ball more. However, when I went and looked at it, and when you want to, I heard you talking with Aaron Schatz from Football Outsiders earlier in the week, and he talked a lot about context and game situation. And what was really interesting when I looked at some of the numbers, and one of the stats that you'll hear a lot of analytics, football nerd types talk about is success rate. And you look at the Ravens offense in the first quarter, the first half, but the first quarter specifically, they're running the ball as frequently as they did last year. I mean, it's off by maybe 1% less. So they're basically running just as frequently as they did last year. The difference is you look at the success rate. And last year it was, I think, second in the NFL. This year they're down in the 20s, I think. And what I mean by success rate is a play is deemed successful by according to how many yards to go to get a first down. And you'll hear different websites and different analysts have different definitions of it, but typically it's somewhere in the neighborhood of on 1st and 10, do you get 40% of those 10 yards to get a first down? On second down, do you get 60% of the necessary yardage to get a first down? On third or fourth down, it's do you get 100% of it? So Nestor, we all know a 1-yard run on 3rd and inches or 4th and inches is a successful play, right? A 1-yard run on 1st and 10 is not a successful play. So it's all about that context. But going back to what I was saying,
I had Aaron Schatz on this week too, so you can you can have it him.
Right. So, but when you look at this Ravens running game, despite the fact that they're averaging 5.6 yards per carry, I looked at them on first down. They're struggling on first down. So if they're not getting as much yardage on first down, and that's kind of been across the board. It's been Lamar Jackson. You look at Mark Ingram, his yards per carry on first down, it's down. Even Gus Edwards, who we've all talked about him running the ball more, hasn't been quite as successful on first down. Well, if you're not as successful on first down, Nestor, what does that mean for second down? Second and longer, right? You're talking more 2nd and 7s, more 2nd and 8s, more 2nd and 9s. Well,
and down the slippery slope we go.
We do. And you look at Lamar Jackson then. Guess what? You look at his splits this year. His first down passing has been really good. His third down passing has been totally fine and good. Second down, where that was his most successful down passing last year. This year, it's been a disaster. And I can't help but look and say, well, they're getting off schedule. They're not getting the successful 5, 6, 7-yard runs on first down where suddenly now you're in 2nd and 2 where your entire playbook is just sitting there for you. You can run. You could even quarterback sneak and probably get the first down there.
Yeah, but when you're in 2, this team was in 2nd and 2 more than any team I've ever seen. Pop Warner anywhere, anytime, and it went on for a year and a half.
Right. And but this year now you're seeing more 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9, and now you're putting Lamar Jackson in much more of a pass-heavy situation, right? I mean, yeah, you could still run there, but most, from an analytics standpoint, if you're in 2nd and long, you should be throwing the ball. The analytics would tell you to throw the ball on first down as well, but we know the Ravens are a little bit different in that way. But I can't help but look at this trickle-down effect and say, okay, they're not running well on first down. Why is that? Yes, no Marshall Yanda. Teams might be on to them as far as, hey, they just want to run the ball a lot. They have some best practices now to contain Lamar Jackson a little bit more. So that's not working as much. And then they've really struggled on second down passing. So I almost take the opposite approach about what a lot of people were saying after I looked at this. I honestly think maybe the Ravens should come out throwing on first down a little bit more because Lamar Jackson's had some success doing that, and then be running more on those 2nd and short situations. And maybe that's the way to get themselves going a little more.
But they better be good at it. They better be good at it.
But that's the thing.
2nd and 10, that's not as good as 2nd and 7.
Well, but at the same time, we talk about this a lot, and this is more of a universal look at it. Teams are more efficient passing the ball than running the ball. I mean, they just are. Think about it. The best running games in the NFL average what? 5.5 yards per carry.
That's why everybody's trying to throw it, right? Literally, except the Ravens.
The worst passing games still are somewhere in the neighborhood of 6.3, 6.4, 6.5 yards per passing attempt. So that's a simplistic
Well,
look at it, but
let's go back to the Flacco offense of Marty Morningwig and all. Not this early in the morning, but usually, I mean. The idea was to try to pass the ball to the tight end or get the running back out in the flat to throw the ball on first down. In this offense, thinking that, well, Mark Andrews makes space, Hollywood makes space. Willie Snead used to be able to have a little bit of throwing the ball on these darts to get themselves. That would sort of open some things up, but you better be successful at it because I would still say on a case-by-case basis, running the ball the way they were power running with Yonda last year and the old offense was still, a little bit more bread and butter than thinking you're going to be really good at that at this point.
oh, sure. No, there's no question. In a perfect world, yeah, you do what you did last year. But my point is, you don't have Marshall Yanda's not walking through that door, and if he is, he's 235 pounds now, so he's probably playing tight end rather than
and the
right
gimpy
guard.
number 8 in week 5 after
Sure.
whatever when
Ronnie Stanley hasn't been 100%. Yeah,
when you don't want Lamar getting hit. When you say, Lamar, we don't want you to get hit, it'd be nice to go out and win 27-3 when you do that, right? I mean,
sure.
which is what they did, and that's cool that they can manage it that way. But Lamar don't get hit in January is probably not a winning formula.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. And to be very clear, when we're talking about this, and this was my lead at BaltimorePositive.com, kind of breaking this down. Ravens are still a really good football team. They're number 1 in the NFL in DVOA, Football Power Index that ESPN has, which is kind of a metrics measure of a team's efficiency. They're second behind Kansas City. They have the top point differential in the league. So when we're talking about the offense, we're not saying this is a bad offense. We've seen plenty of that in these parts over 25 years, but it has kind of been a middle of the pack offense, which is surprising coming off of a record setting season in that way. So I'm by no means do I have all the answers. And, you mentioned even throwing the ball. We're definitely seeing not the expansion of the passing game that you want to see. We've seen maybe more pass attempts in certain instances, but the target share is still so heavy, Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, that defenses are catching on to that. I mean, in fact, some of the Bengals were talking about that post game. That's like, yeah, we know if they're going to throw it to Andrews or Marquise Brown. Look, every team has their top receiver or two. So that's not exactly like a big shock. But when you do look at the target distribution, you'd like to see some other guys involved a little bit more. And this even goes back to trading Hayden Hurst in the offseason. Not saying it was a bad trade, but their tight end trio was – I mean, we know Lamar is the straw that stirs the drink in this offense. I mean, that's stating the obvious, right? But we knew how pivotal those 3 tight ends were in both the run game from a blocking standpoint, from a play action standpoint, as far as running those 2 tight sets where you're saying, okay, that's probably a running situation, but you have these tight ends who catch the football and makes you
and
more
run
dynamic.
like wide receivers.
Right, and Hayden Hurst, especially the way he can run. So when you traded him, it's not to say you were doomed offensively, but it was a clear statement that you're evolving because, hey, they didn't draft another tight end in the first round to say, oh, we need to replace Hayden Hurst. Their thought was much more, we're going to pivot a little more towards the wide receivers. And guess what? Marquise Brown, fine. We haven't seen that third option behind Brown and Mark Andrews step up to this point. And that's not to say that Hayden Hurst, go look at his numbers. It's not as though he had unbelievable numbers as a receiver. He's pretty modest. Everything about this passing game's modest from a volume standpoint, but those tight ends were just so efficient and so big for Lamar Jackson over the middle of the field, and they just haven't had that same dynamic. And part of it is just, it's as simple as they only have 2 of them now rather than 3. And yes, I know people will mention Patrick Ricard, but he's not Hayden Hurst. He's not going to be running deep seam routes that Hayden Hurst could run, just like Mark Andrews can run. So right there, that was a signal that this passing game they were expecting it to evolve, but we haven't seen the wide receiver play step up to the point to really justify that. Now, it's not to say it won't happen. Whether it's Miles Boykin getting on the same page more with Lamar Jackson, because we've clearly seen some miscommunications there, whether it's giving Devin Duvernay more opportunities, which I'm really a big fan of because I'd love to see his speed on the outside opposite Marquise Brown. I think that could really open up the middle of the field that much more for a Mark Andrews or a Nick Boyle or even a Willie Snead, as you mentioned. So they're still very much a work in progress in that way. So long story short, I mean, looking at this statistical dive that I did, it's they've been a little more reliant on some big runs. They already have 3 runs of 40 or more yards this year. I think they only had 5 all last year. They're on pace to have more 20-plus yard runs than they had a year ago. So what does that tell you? It tells you their yards per carry is being buoyed a little bit by some of those longer runs. And hey, that's an argument right there to say don't give up on the running game because you can break one. We saw it in Washington. Lamar
But when you
Jackson,
don't want your
50-yard run.
quarterback hit, if that's the case, then that's the way you're going to play.
Well, and
right?
it's not just him. Like even talking about those long runs, if you're more reliant on those, you're going to have more stretches of choppy, disjointed play. You're going to have a couple more 3 and outs. You're going to punt more than you did last year. And this goes back to what I've said to you. I mean, this offense was so dynamic, so special last year that it was always going to be very difficult to say, hey, they ran for 3,200 yards last year. Well, they had J.K. Dobbins. Oh, they can run for 3,700 yards. It doesn't work that way. In the same way that Jamal Lewis runs for 2,000 yards in 2003, and if you were trying to project his production moving forward, you probably weren't anticipating him rushing for 2,000 again because it was that special once-in-a-lifetime kind of season. And I think the Ravens are dealing with a little bit of that as far as some regression to the mean. Then you take Yonda out of the equation. You take Hayden Hurst out of the equation, which changes your tight end dynamic. And now you're asking your receivers to do more. And we haven't seen that. Lamar Jackson hasn't been quite as efficient, although he's still terrific. Let's not panic in that regard by any means. But they're still very clearly trying to find their identity. And I'll say this, through 5 games, I don't think that's terribly unique as far as a problem that even good teams have year to year in the NFL, but it does lead to a little more angst, and it is putting more on the defense. And here's the good news. When you have a top 2, top 3 defense, the way that the Ravens have played, even with the Kansas City mess put in there, you're going to be okay. And that's why the Ravens are 4-1, and it feels like they haven't played their best football, but then you remember they've beaten each of those 4 teams by double digits. So they must be doing something right, even if it doesn't look exactly like it did last year.
Well, if they can beat the Eagles where Lamar rushes 6 times for, 38 yards and they win 27-3 again, that's probably where you want to go into the bye week. We're going to have Pittsburgh stuff going on around here. We're going to have bye week stuff. We have all sorts of cool stuff for the election. We are encouraging everyone to get out and vote. My wife noticed the ballot box right in front of Oriole Park at Camden Yards, so we're going to be taking our ballot up there this weekend. All of our WNST coverage and Baltimore Positive stuff brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions. I'm wearing the hat. 1-800-CLEAN Water, residential plumbing, boiler services, water analysis, water treatment, water anything, including water delivery and well water treatment as well. Call Liberty Pure for your free water analysis. They took care of my water heater. They can take care of you. They treat the folks at the Ravens facility as well. Doug Workman is my pal. You can find them at acleanwater.com. You can call them right now at 1-800-CLEAN-WATER. The previously mentioned El Guapo is now open for Mexican business. I've eaten Mexican food with Luke Jones. He knows his way around a nacho and a salsa and a guacamole and a margarita. We will hope to get over to El Guapo socially distanced. And, of course, outdoor dining still available on a chilly weekend, nice fall weekend. Bring your sweater over at State Fair in Catonsville. Full Circle Tire and Auto up in Harford County. 38 brands of tires, and more tires in stock. Same-day service guaranteed, lowest installed price anywhere in Harford County. Dave's been our pal for 2 decades. You can find him. Also, there's 1995 oil changes there for you. 410-676-CARS. Make sure you like them out on Facebook as well. That's Full Circle Tire and Auto. I wear the shirt sometimes here on the set. Luke, rest up, my brother. Any parting shot, that anything we left out here? I mean, yes, I can bring you a pretzel if you'd like. I'll honk the horn for Gritty while I'm up there in Philly for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. But, I mean, for the Ravens, just take care of business. I mean, anytime you're talking about a road game especially, let's keep in mind this team continues to win on the road, and we know how I know it's different in 2020, but there'll be some fans in the stands, and I'm guessing those Eagles players will be a little more fired up, as I would expect the Ravens, if and when they're allowed to have a few thousand fans downtown at the stadium. I'm guessing that'll galvanize them a little bit, but this is a team they're better than on paper. The Eagles have a lot of issues. We just spent some time talking about the Ravens. It's very relative compared to some of the issues the Eagles have. So take care of business, get to 5-1, escape Philadelphia without any major injuries, and then go enjoy your bye week and give this coaching staff a little time to try to iron out some of the kinks with this Ravens offense that I still think is going to be one of the absolute best in the league by season's end. But it's clear they're still searching for it as we're entering week 6.
We're going to have Ravens fans up there, right? I mean, I hadn't thought about that, but, I saw some tickets waving around a little bit, and I thought, well, this isn't just a road game. This is like a game you could go to if you have such an appetite to do such a thing, right?
I know one of my best friends from high school who lives north of Philadelphia. He was already texting me on Wednesday, hey, you making it out to the game? So I'm guessing he's sniffing around for tickets. So at the very least, there'll be at least one Ravens fan among the 6,500, 7,000 fans in Philadelphia.
I am not running a socially distanced bus, and I'd let you sit in the back seat if you wore a mask. I mean, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'll be okay on the couch. I've already my brother-in-law is going to watch the game with me, and I'm going to see him get all ticked off, and I think it'll be okay for the Ravens. But hey, you got to come out and start fast and play a solid football game against a team that's really searching for it right now.
Listen, this is a pro tip from me, and I made an amateur mistake on Sunday. I got the tailgate Rofo chicken early, and my wife got it like 10:30, 11. She was so worried they wouldn't even have chicken. I'm like, they have chicken at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning at the Rofo. Down,
I think they always have it, right? I think it's.
I don't know if it's always.
Maybe not
always
6 in the morning,
there, right?
Yeah.
So I said, just pick up this way we have food and after the game, and I just forgot it's tailgate food. You need to clean off, and all of a sudden I look up and it's like 12:55, and I've been typing and making Baltimore positive and typing, and I'm like, where's that chicken? And next thing you know, I can't touch my phone, and I'm like, Twitter can live without me the first 6-8 minutes of the game. Yeah. So the first couple drives, I was kind of like trying to type with my pinkies and trying to just eat them, because I'm missing my point.
You need voice command, right? You need some voice command tweeting. There you go. Especially eating the Rofo chicken.
I'm going to work on that. Pike is going to have that fixed for us. All right, man. Hey, I wore my Nasty Bits rock and roll shirt for you today, too. So Luke Jones is available anywhere the internet is. He's voting in Pennsylvania. His family votes. Everyone in Pennsylvania needs to vote. It's important that you vote. You're in Maryland, too, but especially if you're in Pennsylvania. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570. Taos in Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore Ravens and Baltimore positive.